Hello, Michael. Thank you for coming today to talk about your career. We're here at UCL's main library. So perhaps we could start at the beginning when you first started research and your early interests in Japan.
Well, my first epidemiological study was a study of men of Japanese ancestry living in Japan, Hawaii and California. And as they migrate across the Pacific, the rate of heart disease goes up and the rate of stroke comes down. By and large, the more Americanized they become, the higher the rate of disease. But the question is, what did Americanization mean? Well, the obvious thing is it meant high saturated fat diet, high levels of cholesterol, more smoking, and the like. And of course, they play a role. But what I showed in my PhD was that there was something else going on. The more men in California were culturally Japanese, the closer their social affiliations with other Japanese, the more they're brought up in the culture of being Japanese, the lower the rate of heart disease, independent of their cholesterol level or their smoking or their blood pressure. So that sensitized me both to the importance of environment in disease and the importance of social and psychosocial processes.
Interesting. And after that, what was the next?
Well, I came back to the UK and got involved in the Whitehall study of British civil servants. And at the time, I, like just about everybody else, thought that stress led to heart attacks, and high status people had more stress, and therefore they'd have more heart attacks. What Whitehall showed was the lower the position in the social hierarchy, the higher the mortality from cardiovascular disease and from a whole range of other diseases. But then I asked myself, whoever spread the rumor that it was more stressful to be high status? Probably high status people spread that rumor. And in our second Whitehall study, what we showed is the lower you were in the social hierarchy, the less control you had at work, the greater stress at work, where that was defined as high demand, low control, or imbalance between effort and reward. So that got me into thinking about inequalities, social inequalities, and importantly, the fact that social inequalities weren't confined to poor health for the poor, but it affected everybody. The higher you were, the better your health. People in the middle have worse health than people at the top, but better health than people at the bottom.
And how was that received by policymakers and governments?
But I've tried to avoid the party political issues and focus on the evidence. And I say the evidence is very clear. We've got to improve conditions for everybody below the very top. And to give you an example of how I've tried to get beyond the party political, I was commissioned by Alan Johnson, who was Secretary of State for Health under the last Labour government, if you can remember when that was, to do a review of health inequalities in England. I produced my review. I had 6 domains of recommendations: the importance of early child development, education and lifelong learning, employment and working conditions, the fact that everybody, even in a rich society, should have the minimum income necessary for a healthy life, the importance of environments in which people live and work, and taking a social causation approach to prevention. So I produced my report, and everybody said, this was commissioned by Labour government. When we have a Tory Prime Minister in number 10, forget it, they'll bury it. They didn't. The coalition government issued a public health white paper, said this is the government's response to Michael Marmot's review, and we have to put reduction of health inequalities at the centre of our public health strategy. So I was a bit pleased, really.
And do you think that each of the 6 social determinants you've just mentioned have been given equal weight and time and dedication that they need by local and national organisations?
We've had much more enthusiastic uptake at a local level than we have at national level, I would say. But we've got local governments all over England with Marmot implementation plans. So they said, we want your 6 to be the basis of our policies. And we're getting that from all around the country. So it's been very enthusiastic.
Yes, interesting. And internationally, the impact through
Well, I was commissioned by the World Health Organization to lead a commission on social determinants of health. We said that we have the knowledge and the means to close the gap in a generation. What we need is the political will and the organization. I had a Swedish parliamentarian say to me that most reports of international bodies get lost within about 6 weeks. He said, yours is still being discussed in the Swedish parliament 5 years later. So it is on the agenda. And I can point to actions in Brazil, in Chile, in Costa Rica, in Slovenia, where people have taken the report of the WHO Commission and are asking the question, what does that mean for us in our local political, social, health context? So I'm delighted people are listening.
Could you tell me something more about the social injustices killing on a grand scale? Explain what that means in a...
What we said in the WHO report, and again it's very much reflected in my book, The Health Gap, that the inequities in power, money and resources drive the inequalities in the conditions of daily life. Right. We know that we could have infant mortality all over the world, under 10 per 1,000 live births. It's not lack of understanding of the causes of infant mortality, and the fact that we don't is unjust.
Yes.
It's wrong.
Thank you. Could you tell me something more about your new book, The Health Gap?
I've written 3 big reports now, the WHO Commission report, the English review, the Marmot review in England, and a European review of social determinants and the health divide. But I want to get the message out to a wider audience. I want to summarize it for people who don't read technical reports. I want to write it, I hope, in a more accessible language. And it's trying to make common cause. I mean, most of the research in understanding social determinants of health has been done in rich countries. But I work on the assumption that the causes of ill health are the same wherever we find them. But they need to be adapted. So we know education's important, but the issue of girls in Glasgow being educated is different from the issue of girls in rural India being educated.
And are there actually any means that people who read the book can take? Is there a call to action for...
It's not so much what you can do as an individual for yourself. It's not a recipe book. It's really about how do we create a better society? And you as an individual have a role in that. You're a member of this society. You can have a better community, a better local community. You can be involved in the kind of civil society organization that transformed the lives of these poor women in India. And that carefully, not being party political, I want right at the center of all government policy to have the quality of lives people are able to lead. And the way I measure that is the likely impact on health and health inequalities. So what you can do, hopefully, by reading my book, be a better informed citizen and help to form judgments on these issues. How do we create a better world?
Yes, and do you think it's within the current generation's power to do that?
Absolutely. I'm not appealing to people's altruism. I am, but not solely to people's altruism. The implication of the social gradient is that you and I are involved. Our health is not as good as it should be because we're not at the very top. I hope you are a nice person and concerned about poor people, but in addition to that, you're not getting as good a deal as you might. All of us below the very top are suffering. So creating a better society won't just relieve poverty and relieve the ill health consequences of poverty, it'll improve health for everybody. Goodness, we could be as healthy as the Japanese.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much indeed, Michael. That was really fascinating, and I've very much enjoyed hearing you today. And so thank you for your time.
A pleasure.